It is a Thursday edition of the Athletic Hockey Show, and it's a battle to see whose voice is actually in proper shape here after a couple of days in Nashville. I think I'm okay.
I'm a little rough, but I'm better than last year.
Really?
Last time we did this all in person, I got a lot of feedback from people saying, like, it must have been a different mic or something because your voice is it wasn't the mic. It was late nights, and we now know COVID
it was
as well.
COVID.
So,
right.
Yeah, I think I'm doing a little bit better.
Yeah.
I'm feeling much better than I was for yesterday's podcast. I'll say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yesterday morning we did the Wednesday show.
Tuesday night
and it was rough.
Tuesday night was a late night for most of us. Wednesday morning was rough, a little bit better. I don't think anybody had a better time in Nashville than Bill Guerin. You guys, first of all, you see Bill Guerin, he gets up to the podium to do the, way to go, David Pagliata, and you're looking at his eyes and you're like, did you just wake up? Did you get out of a heavily chlorinated pool? Like, what happened? And then the first thing he says is, well, big thanks to Tootsie's for keeping us hydrated. And I'm like, oh my God. Right? Did you guys not feel like Bill Guerin looked like
fantastic?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that was a line that was just fed to him as
Yeah.
a way to pander to the home crowd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tootsie's.
That was
terrible. The worst place on earth.
Best place.
Terrible. Awful place.
It's funny. The guy from Vegas is like, that's amazing. And then the two guys from Ottawa are like, it seemed a little crowded.
Yeah, that's it. The guy from Vegas is like, it's a nice relaxed place.
It was, right.
I
know. Someone told me, they're like, man, I wish it wasn't so crowded in here. I'm like, what do you mean? We got plenty of space to move around. This is nothing.
Boy.
Yeah. So, speaking of moving around, I do want to get to this because Sean was fascinated by the use of scooters the other night.
Oh,
that's right. Yeah.
And now I had never been on a scooter. Okay. And I wish I had like 10 or 15 minutes just to play around with the scooter, understand how it works. I've never been on one of these things. But it was it was Jesse Granger, myself, Saad, and Tarek. 4 of us get on these scooters. So I've never been on one of these before. And these guys just take off like down the street in traffic. They're not, because they're like
flying.
Yeah. And I'm flying. And I'm like, okay, well, stop, start, stop. I was on, the Austin Powers, the 30. That was me just kind of learning. Like, okay, now they're out of sight. And now I don't even know where I'm going. But then my phone rings. I can feel it buzzing in my pocket. I'm like, this is like nobody ever phones me. So usually when somebody phones me, it's either air duct cleaning or like something big is going down.
Yep.
So I'm like, oh my God, it's actually somebody phoning me. And it's somebody who keeps me in the loop about the Brinket. I'm like, oh, okay. So I pull over. I get off on the sidewalk, and I'm taking this call. And now I'm thinking, like, oh, these guys are gone. I don't know what I'm going to do.
We turn around, and I'm like, where did Ian go?
Lost him.
He's gone. So I turned around and drove all the way back, like 3 blocks back, to find him.
Yeah. Finds me there on the phone. Anyway.
I almost ran into Roberto Luongo was in the crosswalk, and I almost ran into him on a scooter. I was like, what is going on?
That would have been great.
What a sentence to say.
What a season finale.
Yeah.
After defending goalies all year long, Jesse Granger kills a goaltender at the NHL Draft.
On a scooter, he takes out Roberto Luongo. And then Joe Sakic walked by.
I think it was Joe Sakic's son. I don't think it was Joe Sakic, but he looked just like him. So I'm convinced it was Joe Sakic's son.
Anyway, then we got I got back on the scooter, they still went. The only time I was afraid, to be honest. Do you remember at one point in the scooter ride to the restaurant, there was trees and you had to duck underneath them? That's the only, I'm like, imagine that's how I go out. Like,
this is
decapitated by on a scooter in Nashville.
1984 video game was this scooter ride. You guys got to duck tree branches.
It was.
The tree branches were literally the exact height of the scooter handle. So you had to be
you had to be below the scooter handle. And I'm like, oh my God, this is how it's going to end for me.
I had a blast. I was jumping off curbs. It was great.
Granger was like the Tony Hawk.
Are you an experienced scooter rider?
No, but I did skateboard when I was a kid, younger.
See, but when Granger was a kid and I was a kid, the time span's a little bit different. Because I also used a skateboard as a kid. All that stuff.
Longer.
It's been a little bit longer. A little bit long. Anyway, it was a blast. And then we had a great kind of staff get together on that Tuesday night. And because for people who remember the podcast from last year, the 3 of us could not find food in Montreal. And this year it was completely different. We had no problem getting food.
It was great.
Yeah, it was great.
It was fantastic. Tuesday was a Super great day.
Oh my God, we almost forgot. Let's talk about Sean's adventures of getting from Ottawa to Nashville, because this wasn't an easy trip for you.
No. Well, I ended up, so I missed everything on Tuesday. I got in Tuesday night. I was supposed to get here on Monday. Everything got canceled. This was on Monday. Anyone who's out east, there were bad storms, and Newark especially, but all the New York airports were just canceling everything. And of course, that's where I was flying through. And it just everything got canceled. So I just went home and got on the phone to try to rebook, and there's just nothing. There was no way.
No, you need to tell the listeners about the one itinerary that was offered up to you. This is great. Listen to this.
They kept saying it wasn't one. The very nice and helpful lady that I spoke to kept saying, we're going to put you through SFO. And finally I said, I'm sorry, this must sound like a stupid question, but you keep saying SFO, and I thought that was San Francisco. And she goes, yeah, it is. and I'm like, you're not going to fly me from Ottawa to San Francisco and then give me like an 8-hour layover and we hope for the best. Like, I don't want to be further away than.
And what was the total time again of that trip?
Well, that one would have been a very long day. And then as all this is happening, I was texting with a few people, and one of them was Myrtle, and he's like, "Oh, you got to go on kayak. That'll set you up. Just book whatever you need there." And it came back with a 44-hour itinerary, 3 stops, 44. Like, how does that even?
How is that even an option?
How can that even come up? It's got to be at some point the program. Like, just say no. Just say you don't have anything. And so it ended up that as the other problem we were having is, even though United had canceled all my flights on Monday, they hadn't like released me off the itinerary, so they couldn't rebook me. So they were on hold, they being the company travel people, forever. I'm just sitting there for an hour, and then she suddenly pops on and she's like, United just told me they have one trip, Ottawa, Toronto, Chicago, Nashville. There's 4-hour layovers in between everything. It's on Tuesday. You get in late Tuesday night. Do you want it? Yes or no? You got like 30 seconds. I said, yeah, let's roll the dice. And Tuesday went smooth. It was a long day, but everything was on time. Everything went the way it was supposed to. So at the end of the day, I got here, and it was a pain, but it wasn't as bad as
some other people.
A lot of people,
including, and we want to tell our listeners about this, Saad Youssef, who covers the Dallas Stars. Just a terrific story that's today about the 2 Dallas Stars scouts from Sweden who had I won't give it away, but just an adventure to end all adventures to get here. So, and we also want to say we really legitimately feel badly for our colleague Shayna Goldman, who Sean's talking about Newark. Shayna couldn't even get out from Newark, stuck.
Matthew Fairburn from Buffalo drove.
He drove.
Yep.
From Buffalo.
13 hours, he said. It was 13 hours.
What? Yeah.
Dedication. Like, Sean probably could have, like, Ottawa to Nashville, I think, to drive would be about 16 hours, maybe 15, 16 hours. You know what? Right. Door to door, you probably would have made it faster.
Well, if I'd left on Monday, I would have. Right. I definitely would have been here.
My favorite thing, Sean on Monday, when he's going to the airport, he tweets out, damn, I forgot my headphones.
Yeah.
Is this not the worst thing that could happen to me? And it's like you poke the airport gods. They're like,
100% what I did.
I'll teach you. I'll teach you this. But like, you got here yesterday, you live blogged day 1 of the draft with Sean Gentili. And I'll tell you, I thought the draft moved along at a really quick pace. Like, in fact, at one point, I looked up, I said, wow, we're already at the 22nd, 23rd pick. But I think a part of that was there was just no trades, right? Like usually Gary gets up there, we have a trade to announce, and everyone's like, oh, wow, watching the crowd.
Does everybody have a Gary Bettman impression but me?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't
Is that like a podcast thing? You just have to, okay. Well.
I got to say, as someone who was covering a team with the 32nd pick, it did not seem to move all that quickly for me.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But was that disappointing? Like, as a guy who's live blogging the event, and it's basically not newsworthy outside of, obviously what the Flyers did, and a couple of picks were newsworthy, but
yeah, no, I mean, I'll go further. It was the Connor Bedard draft, which it doesn't feel exciting in the moment because we all know he's the number one pick. We all
Right.
know where he was going. But we will look back and be like, hell yeah, we were there the night that Connor Bedard got picked and it all started. So you had that was cool. Anaheim pulling a little bit of a switcheroo on us at number 2 was interesting.
A little bit of a switcheroo. This poor Ducks fan sitting outside. I ran into him
with the Fantilli jersey.
Yes, and he's got a Fantilli jersey on, and I'm like, "How did you get that jersey so fast?" He's like, "Yeah, I wish I hadn't got it this fast."
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I mean, who had it tougher? The one Ducks fan with the full Fantilli jersey, or all the Habs fans who bought the Shane Wright shirts last year?
Yeah,
I feel like the jersey guys got it worse because
that's expensive.
That's a tough one. And then we got onto the Michkov watch, which I thought was probably the most interesting part of the draft and had the most potential to be interesting. But it just ends up being he drops a couple picks. The teams we didn't think wanted him didn't take him. The first team we thought did take him. Nobody traded up. Nobody jumped in. Nobody did anything creative. And then after that, it just was
snooze city.
I mean, if you're a prospect guy, if you know all the names, and then it was interesting. And if you're a Blues fan or somebody where they had the multiple picks, but it just was everybody just going by the book. And in fact, late in the draft, at one point, I even turned to Gentile, and I was like, nobody's even gone off the board. Like, people are going, like,
that's because Ottawa didn't have a pick in the first round.
Maybe. Well, I mean, between Promen and Wheeler, like, they had their lists, both of which they were fairly different. But I think every pick was within like 3 to 5 of one of those guys. And then we got to the Leafs, and the Leafs went, kind of off the board. So that taught me to say anything. But man, that the 25 picks right after Michkov, it was a bit of a like if you turned off the draft after that and said I'll just get caught up Thursday morning, you didn't really miss anything.
Yeah, and obviously, like you said, Golden Knights picked 32nd, but they did make a trade on Wednesday. Now, it would have been better if they waited till the draft and Gary could have announced it, whatever. But one of the OG Golden Knights is out in Reilly Smith, and we were talking about this just before we started recording that. Like, man, like they run that organization in a kind of ruthless manner. Like, even though there's a sentimental connection, I think, between Reilly and the fan base and all that, see you later. This is what works for us. You're out. I know you had conversations with people around the Knights yesterday. What was the thought process there in moving one of the most popular guys to ever play for the organization?
Yeah, he's a super popular guy. Obviously, being a part of that original team, that just automatically like makes you one of the fan favorites. Yeah. But outside of that, like Reilly Smith was probably the most philanthropic, like connected player on the team. He runs a charity softball game every year where it's the Golden Knights versus the Raiders, and they raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. So he's partial owner of a restaurant across the street from the practice facility. Like, he was really embedded in Vegas. So the fans obviously devastated to see the news, but it makes logical sense when you look at it from just a team building perspective, because they trade a former first round pick in Zach Dean to St. Louis for Ivan Barbashev last trade deadline. So you're invested in that player, and you win a Stanley Cup. So you could say, you know what, that was well worth that first round prospect, just that cup alone, even if you let Barbashev walk. But Barbashev was such a perfect fit on this team. He went right into that first line winger role next to Eichel and Marchessault, and those two are kind of more skilled perimeter players, and Barbashev just crashes the front of the net, and he's just a wrecking ball in there, and it just was a perfect stylistic fit from day one. And you win a Stanley Cup, and he's a huge part of it, and they're like, we got to keep this guy. And so now you're just, okay, we don't have very much cap space, so Barbashev wants about $5 million a year. Reilly Smith makes $5 million a year. I asked Kelly what the decision was like between those two. Kelly McCrimmon told me it wasn't a decision between those two, but that's not true. It was. It most certainly was a decision between those two. And it comes down to, I think you could argue either side is a better player. I think Reilly Smith's a more complete player. I think he's very underrated. He does all the details right. He gets the toughest defensive matchups every night, and he handles it well. But he's 32. And Ivan Barbashev is 5 years younger. He's 27. And so they signed Barbashev to the 5-year deal, 5x5. And he won't be 32 until the end of that deal. So I think all things being equal, You take the 27-year-old over the 32-year-old. You move on from Reilly Smith. They actually got a third-round pick, which the way trades have been happening in these off seasons with teams trying to clear, like, a third-round pick is a pretty good return. I mean, it sounds awful because Reilly Smith's such a good player, but the way the trade market's been with the flat cap and teams having to basically give players away, so they get a return for Reilly Smith. They then turn around immediately sign Ivan Barbashev to that extension. So it's, I think, a tough day for Golden Knights fans who really love Reilly Smith. But I think if you take emotion out of it, there's a lot of logic behind it. Barbashev was a good fit, and I think the Golden Knights are in pretty good shape after it.
And that's what the Knights do. Like, they take all the emotion out of it. The vibe I get from them is they manage the team like, you ever play a video game or a computer game where you're like managing the team, the franchise mode in Madden or whatever, and it's like that, right? If there's a star player available, I want that star player. Let's go. Let's figure out how to get him. I can get 3% better on this forward over that forward. Get rid of the old guy, bring in the new guy. And you could say that's absolutely the right way to do it. I mean, they just won a Stanley Cup with that approach. But it's fascinating to me to see, a guy who's literally, not to be a smart aleck, but a guy who has been the entire history of the franchise just shuffled off because the new guy came in, and he gets your spot, he gets your money. Not a bad way to go out, though. Your last moment in a Golden Knights uniform, being the first cup handoff. That's I guess if you gotta go, it's a good way to do it.
And like obviously his teammates were devastated, might be a strong word, but sad to see a teammate go. William Karlsson, Jonathan Marchessault, those three are best friends. But it takes a little bit of the sting out of it that you all won a cup together, right? Like the fact that they won the cup together, and they'll always have that moment. And like, you hear all the players say when you win a cup with guys, it's like you're friends for life, and that's just a connection you have. So they got to win the cup together, and now Reilly goes to Pittsburgh, where I think he's going to be very good. Like, if you're Reilly Smith, you don't want to leave Vegas, but if you're going to get moved in a cap shedding maneuver, there are a lot worse things to happen than he's most likely going to be playing on either Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin's wing. So like, I would be shocked if he's not on one of those two lines. So pretty good spot for Smith to land for the last 2 years of his deal if you're going to get moved.
Yeah. And so look, that was one of the deals that went down on Wednesday. We're sitting here recording this podcast Thursday, just kind of as the second round starts. Like, do you guys feel like the Dubois piece, that was a big one? Timo Meier, we were wondering what was going to happen. That situation's resolved. He's re-up there. Alex DeBrincat is now, I think, the guy. Like, when you read most trade bait boards on our site, other sites, whatever, Alex DeBrincat is pretty much near the top. Now, you and I were chatting yesterday, Jesse. As soon as that Reilly Smith deal was made, I ran into you. I'm like, is there any way this is Vegas cleaning up some space to take a run at DeBrincat? And you're like, 100%. You could see it.
It seems like something they do.
Sure does.
100%. But that obviously wasn't the case. My understanding of it, and I had a good chat with Pierre Dorion on Wednesday, is there's nothing imminent with Alex DeBrincat. And I think this is what's going to happen. I think they're going to, and again, everything I'm saying could be completely changed within 5 minutes, but I think we're going to get into mid-July on this one. I really do. I'm starting to think that this is going to play out exactly like Matthew Tkachuk last year. Remember Matthew Tkachuk? We went to the draft in Montreal, and there was, is he going to get moved? And there was, who was the team? Was it who was the team that was rumored to, like,
Philadelphia?
Who had the second overall pick last year? Who was picking number 2 after
Jersey?
Yeah, it was just
Jersey.
Was it that not the rumor that like the Devils were taking a run at Matthew Tkachuk and were willing to give up this anyway? But all of that happened, and then nothing happened, and we're like, "Well, what's gonna?" And then 2-3 weeks went by, and then as we got closer to the arbitration date, that's when the deal happened, and then that's when Florida swooped in. I think that's what's going to happen on Alex DeBrincat here.
Does that make sense for Ottawa though? Because I saw you had your piece where you had Pierre Dorion saying there's no pressure point, there's no inflection point at the draft. And I don't know. I mean, Jesse just said his GM told him something that wasn't true.
They all lie at this point.
Pierre Dorion to say there's no inflection point today. I get that, and probably, I mean, if you're Pierre Dorion, you've got an asset like Alex DeBrincat, you're hoping you get a first round pick. So that makes last night the inflection point. When it comes and goes, maybe that does take a bit of the pressure off. But to me, I'm looking at July 1st because cap space is tight around the league right now. But when July 1st comes, that cap space gets spent. And so is anybody going to have the whatever the number is with DeBrincat? Then, it's 9 million, but it could be a little bit less if it goes to arbitration. And obviously you're trying to sign them long term, but there's not going to be a lot of teams in mid-July that have $8 million on the cap just sitting around.
The options for sure go down after all the free agents have been bought.
Yeah, it's a great point. I don't know, but I just saw how it played out with Tkachuk last year. I feel like this is headed down the same path, but yeah, we'll see. But
I mean, the flip side of that is if you're a Senators fan, you're saying, well, it's only 8 or 9 million going out the door if we don't get anything back.
Right.
If we're getting picks and prospects, then it's out the door. But we want players back. We want the Matthew Tkachuk type of deal.
And especially as you guys talk about July 1st, well, you're going to want to know your budget for next year. Like maybe you want to go out and acquire players or sign guys. And anyway, so that's one. The other one I want to ask you guys about is, do you think Connor Hellebuyck, and I know Kevin Shoveldayoff spoke on Wednesday, didn't sound like there was anything imminent on Scheifele and Hellebuyck, but Hellebuyck to me is the most, and with apologies to Alex DeBrincat, Connor Hellebuck's the most interesting guy in the trade market for me. You don't often see goaltenders of this stature with that type of resume.
That's the cliche every year,
available.
Right? Every year,
what
teams need goalies.
Here? Yes,
and there's always, it ends up being Matt Murray or whoever like that, and you go, oh, that's who they wound up with, and people say, well, they sit you down and they get very, they pull out their serious voice and they say, you understand, right, that Vezina caliber goaltenders just aren't on the trade market. That any team that had a guy like that isn't looking to trade him. Now we actually have a guy out there,
right?
And but you're right, because I'm fascinated because what even is the goaltending market after that playoffs we just saw, where, I mean, if you had gone down the list of the star goaltenders, right? Shesterkin, Sorokin, Vasilevsky, all out in the first round. Sergei Bobrovsky, this guy that we thought was a bum, kind of reborn as his old self, which in theory, you're looking at that going, okay, that's what a goalie can do for you at playoff time. He's out here just dragging this team to all these upset wins, taking them all the way to the Stanley Cup final. So maybe that boosts the idea of go out and get a big name goalie.
Yeah.
But when it's all said and done, last guy standing, Aiden Hill. So if I'm a GM, do I need a goalie at all? Why don't I just go get the third string guy off the 28th place team, and that guy might be good enough.
Yeah.
So what am I going to give up for Connor Hellebuyck?
Right. I think, the two teams that made the finals made arguments against each other, right?
Exactly.
So the $10 million goalie finally worked, and then he lost to 3 goalies that nobody had ever heard of and just were behind a really strong team. For me, and I said this yesterday, I think Hellebuyck, it's most interesting, but also I don't think there's another player out there that will impact the Stanley Cup odds, and not just the actual odds, but just the way we all feel heading into next season. I don't think there's a player out there, a move out there that can change as dramatically the way we feel about a team than if New Jersey or one of these teams adds Connor Hellebuyck, because that position is just so important. And like Marc-Andre Fleury got traded after his Vezina season, but he was a little older. Like Connor Hellebuyck is in the prime of his career. He's been one of the best goalies in the league for 5 straight years, statistically probably even longer if you ignore the one down season. But to me, it's a question of, I don't think it's the assets you have to give up for Connor Hellebuyck that's maybe holding things up. I think it's the contract that you have to give him after, and it's what GM in this environment, like you just said all the reasons, in this environment where maybe you don't have to pay your goalie a lot to win, which GM is going to say, no, I'm going to be the one to do it. I'm going to trade these assets for him, and I'm going to sign him to that big extension.
Oh, that is where you get so worried. I have written about this for going back years now. I call it the shiny new toy syndrome, which is when you look at the very worst contracts in the league, so many of them are guys who a team has just traded for. You trade for a guy who's either an RFA, needs a new deal right away, or it's a guy who is 1 year away. You want to get that extension done. Because as a GM, I mean, what leverage do you have? You've just given up a bunch of assets. You've had the press conference. Your fans are excited. And then you got to sit down and work out a deal with this guy. I mean, they've got you over a barrel at that point. They're saying, I mean, we know you love this guy. We just saw what you gave up for him. So you got to get the big contract. And so many of them, those awful deals. Seth Jones, great example, right? Chicago goes out and trades for him. The trade itself, not bad, but
The extension.
they go and do the extension. You look at last year, I mean, Matthew Tkachuk's situation, that looks like a great deal for Florida, but then look at what Calgary got coming back, right?
Yep.
Mackenzie Weegar, maybe not bad. The Jonathan Huberdeau deal looks disastrous right now. A lot of us love that trade for Calgary when it went down, but now you got to sign the guys, and it's just you go on down the list. There are so many awful trades, so many trades that on paper the trade itself is fine, but it's that contract you give out, and to give a goaltender who's 30 years old, 7 years, 8 years if it's a sign or trade, I wouldn't want any part of it. Now, again, we've been talking about look at this year's final. Go back a few years before that, right? Because the counter argument is going to be, so you wouldn't give a guy 8 years, so you wouldn't get an Andrei Vasilevsky guy.
Right.
Look at him, right? You can't win with a goalie on a big contract. 2 championships, another trip to the final with Andrei Vasilevsky. The Lightning would do that deal again 10 times out of 10.
Yep.
You look at Colorado. Colorado wins with Darcy Kemper. Certainly not a guy at that level, but a guy they went and traded for the year before. They traded, gave up a first-round pick, had him for 1 year, let him walk, but they got a Stanley Cup out of it. Kevin Cheveldayoff's pulling that out.
Yep.
And then you go back further than that, and St. Louis wins with a guy out of the ECHL. So who knows? Who has any idea?
Complete voodoo.
It really does feel like you look at the New Jersey Devils, and to me, that's the nexus of all of this, because There. How often do we say, right? We say there's no good goalies available, and usually good teams already have a goalie. Bad teams don't have goalies, but bad teams shouldn't be giving up stuff. New Jersey is a really, really good team that doesn't have the goaltender.
Okay, but when you listen to Pierre LeBrun and all the insiders, they keep saying Hellebuyck wants Vasilevsky money, right? So that's nine and a half.
Which he should.
I'm not arguing against that at all.
Yeah.
But like Sean says, if you give him 7 years, 8 years, takes him into his mid to late 30s. The bigger question I have is, can they even fit him in now that they got, my question is, was Timo Meier's money the money for Connor Hellebuyck? Or I think in 2 years from now, the Jack Hughes contract will be the best contract in the NHL.
You could make the case right now.
Right now. Yeah. They got him at a little bit of it. Is there enough there? Is there enough money that you think you can get Hellebuyck at the $9 million that he wants?
Yeah, and how much of it is Hellebuyck wanting? How much is he factoring in the fit? What team he's on? Maybe he's got certain preferences on where he'd like to play. All of that sort of stuff. He does. I don't know if he has any sort of no trade protection, but in this case, his no trade protection is the fact that he needs to sign.
Right. If he just tells them, I'm not going to sign an extension with you, they won't trade for him. So
now,
he can pick whatever team.
Have we heard, has Winnipeg said anything about being open to let him talk to teams, or is this, do you have to go in blind?
No, it's interesting because Ottawa's in the exact same boat with the Brinkett, and they're not letting him talk to other teams until they feel like they've got the framework of a trade. Mm-hmm. Then they're going to green light.
Which is not a bad way to do it.
It's not a bad way to do it.
Because it's tough, right? Because you, on the one hand, you might have teams calling up saying, what do you, Pierre, you want a first round pick? I can't do a first round pick if I don't know I can get him signed. So maybe the market is a little bit cooler. But the flip side is you start letting people talk to your guy.
I know. Then
your guys' demands are high, and people come back on, you know what, I'm out. And suddenly you don't have a market anymore because nobody's all that interested. So, I mean, even if he can't talk to people, there's ways for it to be done, right? There's ways for that information to get out to teams and temperatures to be taken. But yeah, I'm with you. That is the most interesting thing. And was it Pierre, his piece? Somebody this week had something saying, don't be stunned if Connor Hellebuyck is the Jets goaltender on opening night. Man, I don't know that you can do that if you're Winnipeg.
Would you guys, if New Jersey gets Connor Hellebuyck, how comfortable are you saying the New Jersey Devils are the team to beat in the Eastern Conference?
I mean, there's so many good teams in the East. Florida beat them all. So, the 8th seed ended up coming out, and I think we forget how stacked the East was, at the start of the playoffs with Boston and Tampa and Toronto.
Healthy Carolina.
Yeah, I think they're significantly better, and I feel a lot better about them, and I think they're absolutely right there with Boston and Toronto and those teams, but I wouldn't say they're they're the team to beat.
I've been worried for a while now that we were going to see the step back from New Jersey. That so often when you see a young team make that unexpected leap,
right? There's the
even
correction
though
year.
we're just, I mean, not even necessarily correction. Even if it was just a year where they stayed put, that would feel like a disappointment for a team like this, because we've all got these little lizard brains and we just remember only what's recently happened. And you see a team make that big step and say, okay, it's going to be that every year, and so often it isn't. But also so often, especially when it's a young team, you don't see the major changes happen. You see they stay the course. So this would be a big move, and boy, I'm fascinated to see it. I know Buffalo's another team that's kind of looking to make that New Jersey type of leap.
But do you think Hellebuyck to Buffalo makes any sense? I think Buffalo is right there, but they also, and Devin Levi. Yes. I love this guy. I had chance to spend some time with him at the Worlds. The most ice in his veins, cool, calm, and he actually looks like. Have you guys ever looked at a picture of Devin Levi? Put it side by side next to Carey Price. Legitimately, really? He looks exact. And anyway, I just love this kid. I just think he's just so cool and calm. But if you're Buffalo, would you kick the tires on Connor Hellebuyck or no?
I think you kick the tires. I mean, the thing with Hellebuyck is we're talking, as we always do when you talk about contracts, we're talking about the dollar value. Is it going to start with a 9? Is it going to be Vasilevsky money? Is it it's to me, it's the length. Yeah, that scares me for a guy at that position, that age. If I'm Buffalo and Connor Hellebuyck is willing to do a shorter deal, I'll go to a high number. Yeah, absolutely. I've got no problem with Vasilevsky money, but it's that long-term thing. And doesn't this feel a little bit like the Florida Panthers with Sergei Bobrovsky? When they signed him as a free agent, and I think it was the same year they drafted Spencer Knight.
Yep.
And that one, even there, you sort of went, why would you have you got Spencer Knight? Why would you go out and give 7-8 years to a goaltender like Sergei Bobrovsky? And that was a goalie who was still going to be 3 years away. And then we saw even not that long into the contract, suddenly you're sitting there going, okay, now you got 2 guys. How does it fit? In the case of Buffalo, their kid's way closer, to the point where he could be ready this year. I mean, maybe this is the year that he's there. So I don't think you want to put an 8-year guy ahead of him. But at the same time, if you're Buffalo, you might be sitting there going, what are we up to? 12 years without the playoffs?
Yep.
Got pieces here. We can't do this again. We can't get up to the door and then fall back and have to start all over again. We've got to make the push forward. So, maybe you take the big swing, but New Jersey feels like the much better fit to me.
But I honestly think the Devils, if they get Hellebuyck, they added to Foley, they got all those Myers coming back, Dougie Hamilton is that I just don't know who's a better team in the East.
Yeah, it's a great team.
What do they have? They almost won the division last year, right? They almost won the division. Now you gotten Hellebuyck and Toffoli in this scenario, and you didn't I just don't know how they're not the best team in the conference. And I think the needle is pointing down.
Boston won the most games in the history of the league last year. I mean, they're going to lose some guys and they're getting a year older, but
I just feel like the needle is pointing down on Boston, on Tampa. I'm not sure about Toronto, which way that needle is. It just might be a straight line, but all of those teams, there's only one of them that the needle is pointing firmly up, and that's New Jersey. The Rangers might be flat. The Carolina Hurricanes might be flat. One team out of the 8, and now you might add the
playoff
best
teams. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and now you might add a Vezina. I just don't know how they're not the best team in the. But what a great turn of events for that franchise, right?
Yep.
It's been a tough.
Yep.
And I always think too, if I was a player, I know some people think I wouldn't want to play in New Jersey. Wouldn't you guys think it's a great spot to play? You're literally a stone's throw from Manhattan. Mm-hmm. You can enjoy the city life as you need it. You can, I feel like you have all the benefits of a big city without the big city pressure, without the big city, media market, all that stuff.
You've got a flawless airport that just works like a well-oiled machine right there for
Newark is right there. Yeah. Anyway, It's going to be fascinating.
Here's my last question on Hellebuyck, right? Because we talk about New Jersey, Buffalo, maybe not. Who else is out there? Because if you're Winnipeg, if there's only one team bidding, this isn't going to go well. This is not going to be a deal that Winnipeg fans like. If there's two teams bidding that really want the guy, that changes the whole equation. And then obviously if you can get 3, 4, 5, I'm just not sure who else is out there that, again, like there's certainly lots of bad teams that need a goalie. But if you're Connor Hellebuyck with that leverage,
well, when you look at good teams that need a goalie, so Carolina has already said they want to bring back their two goalies,
they want to bring
Anderson and Ranta back. Yeah. If they were to suddenly not want to bring those two back, but Carolina is a great team that could use a goalie, and they've been looking for a goalie. I feel like I've been saying this every year since I've been alive, that Carolina needs a goalie.
Every year their goaltending ends up being good enough.
No, it isn't. This is the argument I have with everyone. The goaltending is terrible. The team in front of them is just so good that it covers it up. Okay. And then the stats are fine. And then trust me, I get it from Hurricane fans because I tell them their goalies are bad. And then halfway through the year, they've got a .915 save percentage. And they're like, you were wrong. They're great. And then you get to the playoffs when you actually need the goalie to make some saves and he can't. And it's been happening forever with this team. And it's like during the regular season, when Carolina has like 85% of the shot attempts in every game they play because they possess the puck so well, the goaltending doesn't matter. Then you get to the playoffs, the games get important.
Everything tightens up.
Freddie Anderson was good this year, though, in the playoffs.
I think he was okay. I think he was.
What did Freddie Anderson do to get kicked out of the goaltending fraternity here?
I think he's an okay goalie. I think Freddie Anderson's a fine goalie. Mm-hmm. Is he a Stanley Cup winning goalie? I don't know. I think Connor Hellebuyck is.
You just covered Adin Hill. Like, you know what I mean? I think he's good enough. But counting on getting that is a different story.
It's not a strategy to say somebody's going to come out of nowhere next year, so we're just hoping it's our guy. That's not.
No. But if you play to your point, Carolina dominates the analytics, the underlying numbers, all that. That in theory, if any team should be able to win with pedestrian goaltending, it's them.
I agree. I agree with that.
But don't you always? The one thing you hear about Carolina is, gosh, they could use a sniper. They could use a scorer.
Well, that was somebody with this finishing year. It
touch,
was
right.
Yeah,
right. They couldn't finish. Yeah,
and the other thing is, if we're talking about a guy who's a year away from free agency, wants a big contract, is Carolina the spot for that? Is Tom Dutton the guy who's going to sign the record-breaking goaltender contract? The way that they work there,
right? And all signs point to them bringing back their two guys. And again, it's not. You don't look at them and say, "Wow, their goaltending's terrible. Good luck." It's okay. It's fine. It's just if Carolina gets Connor Hellebuyck, are they not the favorites in the East? Like,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so.
So it's like,
maybe Hellebuyck, like you said earlier, he could be the guy that swings the odds in somebody's favor. The last guy I want to talk about is Erik Karlsson, because here's the reigning Norris Trophy winning defenseman. Fresh off a 100-point season. Fun little story for the listeners. So we're staying at the same hotel here in Nashville as the San Jose Sharks. Sharks are in our hotel. We had staff meetings throughout the week. And on Monday, we had a meeting that was like adjacent to the Sharks room. So literally you'd walk in and there was a sign, San Jose Sharks, meeting room A, the Athletic meeting room B. And I guess the Sharks lost their, they're like, we are not having, because you can imagine 25 reporters with cups up against the.
That you always see the tweet. We're hearing that, it would have literally been true this time.
We're hearing that San Jose is really. So they punted us to a different room, but then our guy like James Myrtle and everyone were like, actually, the Sharks upgraded us.
Yeah,
the room was
huge,
huge, and it was a great ball. Anyway, but so the Sharks are here, and obviously, it got me thinking. I wonder, are they super sensitive to the fact that maybe some of the stuff they're going to be chatting about, and you would think Karlsson would be at the top of the list, that they're worried about that. But now we're sitting here on Thursday. Karlsson hasn't been moved, and Mike Greer said probably not. Somebody said, "Are you willing to eat 50% of Karlsson's salary?" And his answer was probably not, which is definitely. He didn't say definitely not. So to me, it left a little bit of room to get in the door. But here's my question. Even if they don't eat 50%, if they ate 20% or 30%, now you're getting Erik Karlsson at 8.5, whatever.
Mhm.
If Erik Karlsson was a free agent on Sunday and you could sign him for 4 years at 8.5, would you do it?
Yeah,
I think
that's
right?
to me, that is how the math works on this. What would Erik Karlsson get on a 4-year deal on the open market?
I think at
And
least 8.5.
Well, okay, well, so here's the thing, though. If he gets 8.5, if we're saying that is the comfort level as far as the risk with the injury and everything, then that means that's how much the Sharks have to eat just to get this down to neutral value. Because remember, you sign a free agent, you're not giving up assets.
Exactly.
So you're not getting a first-round pick by knocking it down to 8.5. You're not getting top prospects. That's the number they have to get down to for this to just be some team will take him. And then you have to get even lower than that to create the value where you're now getting assets. So, I mean, I said at the deadline, I said, this is the time to move Erik Karlsson because he's having an all-time great season. You're getting 5 playoff runs instead of 4. You're getting, including the playoff run, in the greatest season that he will probably ever have in his career. And everybody said that the usual NHL stuff, it's too complicated. It's going to take too long. Kick the can down the road. We have to do it in the summer. And I said at the time, I don't think in the summer they're going to be able to do it. Now, what has changed is it feels like the conversation has gone from the Sharks would be open to an Erik Karlsson trade. Erik Karlsson would be open to it to Erik Karlsson wants to be moved. And at this point, if Erik Karlsson is going to Mike Grier saying, get me out of here, not necessarily in so many words, but I want to go play for a contender. I don't want to be here for the rebuild. Maybe maybe that motivates everyone a little bit more. But I think the time to do it was during the season. And I think that right now, I mean, if you're a Sharks fan and you're sitting there going, this guy just had one of the greatest seasons a defenseman's ever had. He just won the Norris Trophy, man. We're going to get a ton for this guy. I don't know that you are unless, Mike Grier. And look, if I'm Mike Grier, I'm sitting there with a sliding scale. When teams call up and say, what's it going to cost to get Erik Karlsson with some salary retained? Well, what are we talking about? You want 50%? The price looks like this, and it's high, and it involves, some real top shelf assets. Could we go down to 30%? Okay, now the price looks like this. Can we get it as close to zero as possible? Then suddenly the price gets real cheap and we just move on from the contract. But I don't know that it's going to happen. And I can't wait till this podcast comes out in 3 hours and Karlsson's been traded. DeBrincat's been traded. They've been traded for each other. And we're just, the entire thing is completely obsolete.
3-way deal with Hellebuyck maybe worked in.
Yeah, we have to get our producer to cut it all out. People are like, why is the podcast only 7 minutes long on Thursday? It's just all scooter talk. What the hell?
Hell is this? I think, and this is an opportunity to give the little the plug for BetMGM, which is our partner here with The Athletic. And as you look at the odds, people put the odds out on where's Erik Karlsson going to end up. Interestingly enough, Ottawa is at the top of the list. And that's like Erik lives in Ottawa, loves it. I can't tell you how much the guy loves it there. I just don't think it works right now for Ottawa. But you probably read this. LeBron said Treliving kicked the tires a little bit on Karlsson to Toronto. What do you guys think? If you had to pick a spot that Erik Karlsson, like, would you be comfortable saying, I'm willing to put money down that Erik Karlsson ends up in the province of Ontario?
I don't think so. I don't think the Leafs are in on it. This is one of these things that you've heard a lot of in the last little while, is that Brad Treliving calls about everybody. And in fact, I've had some Calgary fans say, you're going to just have to get used to the fact that he's in on everybody and doesn't get any of them.
He's the opposite of Vegas.
Which you know what? That's not a bad way to be as a GM. You should be in on it. You should pick up the phone. Who knows? You don't have the cap room. Maybe you don't even have the need. Pick up the phone. Have the 10-minute conversation. Who knows where it leads? But having that guy in Toronto is an interesting fit, because we all know any conversation that the Maple Leafs, because they suck up so much of the oxygen coverage-wise in Canada, in the NHL in general, as soon as they even talk to anyone, it gets out there. The Leafs are talking to somebody, because then Erik Karlsson's picture is going to be on the top of every homepage, because you're going to hear that the Leafs are in on them. I can't imagine that there's any scenario where it makes sense for the Leafs to not to add a guy like that. Yeah, they need a great defenseman like that, but with with the way the salaries work and everything, I just can't see it. Ottawa, I think, not to beat the dead horse, but in the middle of the season, before the ownership change and Pierre Dorian was on a little more secure ground, probably makes sense. It's tough. I'd be very surprised if I would be outright shocked if it was Toronto, and I'd be surprised if it was Ottawa.
I agree
He's
with
going
you.
to end up in Vegas, isn't
Right.
it?
Yep.
I agree with you that the salary cap doesn't make any sense for the Leafs, but I said it yesterday. I don't care. Do it anyway. It's too much fun. It's too much fun to have that guy. The way he moves the puck up the ice to those forwards in that market with that story about how they haven't won in forever. I need it. I need Erik Karlsson.
How
in Toronto?
How much are Senators fans cringing right now hearing us even say that?
Karlsson to Toronto, like that would hurt on so many levels.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you already had to watch us corrupt Jason Spezza.
Yeah,
now you gotta.
Yeah, Spezza was, and now it's in Spezza in Pittsburgh is really weird because Ottawa and Pittsburgh had some unbelievable playoff games and rivalries. They met in the playoffs in 07, 08, 2010, 2013. Jason was there for all of them. And now he's going to work for them. Yeah, I think Karlsson, if you want to really stick the dagger into a fan base, put Erik Karlsson in blue and white.
So where else does he go if it's not?
Can I throw one other team out? And I don't know if it works, but Detroit.
I tell you, I am so interested to see what Detroit does because I'm not sure I've ever seen a team with this kind of vibe around it where, I mean, the rebuild has been going on for 6 years now. Steve Yzerman has not been there for all of it, but he's been there for a while now. And the progress just seems to be minimal. Right. Another year of being sellers at the deadline. They had that 2-game series with Ottawa this year and then got their doors kicked in both games, immediately go into sell mode. Any other fan base, you feel like there would be a lot of impatience. And Detroit is a great classic traditional fan base where a lot of times you'd say there's not a lot of patience, but it's Steve Yzerman. And every time that I even nod towards suggesting that maybe it's time for Steve Yzerman to pick up the pace a little bit here, maybe it's time to see some progress, Detroit fans, absolutely, the faith that they seem to have in this guy is just, they are all in on the Steve Yzerman plan. And if he tells them it's got to, that it's going to be 5 more years, then they will ride for 5 more years. But yeah, I mean,
I think this year is the year. They need to be in the playoffs this year. Or at least
what's their path to get
But don't you think Buffalo, Ottawa, and Detroit are in the same bucket?
Yeah.
In terms, and don't you also feel like Buffalo might be a touch ahead of the other two, and Ottawa might be a touch ahead of Detroit?
Yeah.
Or am I wrong on that?
I might say Buffalo more than a touch ahead, but yeah, I think you've got the order right.
You know what I mean? So if all of them are going into this offseason with the idea we got to take a step forward and get into the playoffs, that's all well and fine. Mm-hmm. One of the 8 teams will be out of the playoffs. I don't think 3. Do you think
agree.
I mean
3,
maybe.
and that's with Pittsburgh. It has a mandate to get back into the playoffs.
Yes.
So I mean that's another team. I think Washington is taking the step back, but that's another team that's in there. It's there's not going to be enough chairs left when the music stops. And you're right. If we just said Buffalo, then Ottawa, then Detroit, they go and add Erik Karlsson or Alex DeBrincat. That's another name they've been linked to as far as the people from the outside saying this would make sense.
What I was saying though is I don't think Detroit is a playoff team, and for all those reasons you just said.
Yeah.
But I think if they miss the playoffs again this year, to me it feels like that's when the heat turns up a little. Like right now, everyone's like, "Yeah, we're okay. We're still building."
If it was any other GM or any other team, I feel like the heat would already be there. It just feels like this is Steve Yzerman in Detroit. A guy it's not just that he's the franchise icon, because we saw, Carolina ran out of patience with Ron Francis and, that sort of thing. But he's the franchise icon who did it somewhere else.
Right.
And then came in, and it's like they're ready to go. You're looking at Twitter.
I'm looking at it because Danielle, our producer, has sent us a note because it's, as you know, these things are fluid.
Okay.
Not a huge trade, but a trade. The Chicago Blackhawks have acquired Josh Bailey and a second-round pick in 2026. So second round pick and Josh Bailey from the Islanders for futures.
Right. So that's the salary.
And again, Chicago's been pretty like I mean, they're a team that they got Nick Foligno now for another year at $4 million.
How much time? What does Josh Bailey have left?
He's $5 million cap hit and 1 year left on his deal, according to Scott Powers. So Josh Bailey is one of those guys that you look at the Islanders all-time games played list, right? And he's like right up there. He's like more games than a lot of guys. But here we go, right? Like teams are trying to move ahead of July 1st. What can I move out?
Kyle Davidson did everything short of like unfurl a sign last night where he said like, yes, we are open. We will take, and this is exactly the sort of deal that you make. I mean, the Taylor Hall one was the obvious one. You get somebody with short term. You're not locking yourself in for a while. You got Connor Bedard now. He's got to have some guys to play with.
Right.
He's got to have some guys to learn from how to be an NHLer. You can't just surround him with the same roster you had last year. And you get an asset. You get cap space. You spend cap space that you have a ton of. I mean, they need to get to the floor before they're worried about the ceiling. That makes perfect sense. And for the Islanders, it always hurts to have to pay to get out from contracts, but a second round pick to get out from $5 million is not bad considering what we've seen other teams pay over the years.
Yeah. Real quick, let's do one mailbag question here. Reminder, you can reach us at the Athletic Hockey Show at gmail.com. You can also leave us a voicemail, 845-445-8459. This is from Jason. Last week, of course, we had the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. 3 goalies go in. Pierre Turgeon goes in. Jason wants to know, why is Keith Tkachuk not in the Hall of Fame? 500 goals, 1,000 points, 1,200 games, etc. Good international player. Why is Keith Tkachuk not in the Hall of Fame for you guys?
I think he's got a solid case. And in fact, I would say this is probably the first time where I'd say I feel like he's more likely than not to go in. Pierre Turgeon was the guy that I looked at, and because the argument for Keith Tkachuk that a lot of people would say is, look at the goals scored list. Everybody who's ahead of him who's eligible is in the Hall of Fame. He's the all-time leading goal scorer who's not in the Hall of Fame who's eligible. Pierre Turgeon was the all-time leading points guy. And my argument with Pierre Turgeon was, if you put him in, then the next guy on the list is Jeremy Roenick. If Jeremy Roenick goes in, then we're down to Vince Damphousse. And there's Bernie Nichols, I want to say, is the other guy. So somebody's got to be that guy.
Right.
We can't just keep going down the list, put everyone in. I want to say if Tkachuk goes in, it might be Pat Verbeek, might be the next guy on the list. So, the argument against Keith Tkachuk, his numbers are very good. They're not slam dunk territory. He doesn't have a lot of the all-star selections, that sort of thing.
It was kind of a stat compiler. Like if you play long enough at a pretty good level, you're going to have a lot of stats.
Except that he wasn't, not at that like Patrick Marleau or even Pierre Turgeon level. Like he had a few years,
multiple 50-goal years, right?
Near the top of the league in goals. Also, I mean, just I'm not sure there have been many players who've ever been as good as Keith Tkachuk without any playoff success at all. I mean, I don't know that
he went to Atlanta.
That he was ever out of this most successful run in franchise history.
Exactly. How could you do that?
He never got out of the second round, I want to say, but that doesn't seem to be something that gets held against guys like that.
Even Pierre Turgeon. Did Pierre Turgeon ever get? Oh, I guess one year with the Islanders. Oh no, he didn't even play that. Dale Hunter took him
didn't play.
I don't think Pierre or maybe one of those St. Louis.
Pierre Turgeon bounced around so much that it's hard to say. So, anyways, I didn't think Pierre Turgeon belonged in, but he's in. And Keith Tkachuk feels like a comparable, and I think Keith Tkachuk probably has a stronger case. And even though it has nothing to do with what he did on the ice, having Matthew and Brady be front and center doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt Keith Tkachuk's case. I think he does get in at this point, but it is a question where the pipeline, the Hall of Fame pipeline, gets pretty crowded. This year was the last year for a while, we think, where there were going to be a lot of open spaces. They did some very interesting things with who they put in. So,
do you think Tkachuk's case is better than Rod Brind'Amour?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Rod Brind'Amour's case is oversold, and I know that that's frustrating to Carolina fans. To me, this is. I remember 10 years ago when I was at Grantland, and this was when Marian Hossa was winding down, and everybody was writing pieces about Marian Hossa saying first ballot Hall of Famer. As soon as he's done, he's in the Hall of Fame. And I wrote a piece where I said, are we sure Marian Hossa is a first ballot Hall of Famer? And I compared him to a few guys, including Rod Brind'Amour. And I said, Rod Brind'Amour's got 1,200 points. He won 2 Selkies. And yet you never hear Rod Brind'Amour mentioned in the Hall. And you didn't. I mean, back then we all, we do our list. He wasn't even in the conversation. Now, obviously, we don't know what the committee does. We don't know if he was being discussed or anything. But back then, I was making the observation that there was just no buzz around this guy. And then over the years, it's built and built to the point where now you get Carolina fans saying, like, this guy's a slam dunk.
Right.
How is this guy not in? To me, he had the thing with Rod Brind'Amour. You talk about a compiler. This was a guy played forever. He's a compiler. Never a guy was. I mean, forget about all-stars or getting Hart Trophy votes. This was a guy who was a second-line center on a good team, even those Carolina teams.
Right.
You never felt like this guy's a Hall of Fame guy. He has the 2 Selkies.
I think
he didn't get any votes any other year. So
to me, Brind'Amour is a guy that, like, the stats don't explain the impact he had on the sport of hockey and the league, right? Like, I feel like when you think of the Hurricanes as a franchise and the moments he's had for that team, like, then, does importance to the sport of hockey, like, I feel like he's more important than his stats suggest.
Importance to the sport of hockey, sure. I mean, for example, like Alexander McGillney being the obvious one. I think you can point to McGillney and what he did opening up the door for the Soviet players. There is a difference between importance to hockey and importance to one franchise.
That's true.
It's perfect. Look, if somebody is important to one franchise, that's why we retire numbers. That's why we do ceremonies. That's why we build statues.
That's fair.
Do all of that. I mean, Rick Nash is the most important player in the history of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Miku Koivu in Minnesota, you could say the same sort of thing, or you go down the list. And then, I know that the reason I know the Brind'Amour's case isn't that strong is the weird arguments that, Carolina fans will say that, oh, he's so important to Carolina, or they break out this, he was so important to the way nutrition and, it's Rod Brind'Amour. Look, man, we all love the workout videos. He didn't invent exercising.
That's good.
Like, like we're not putting Gary Roberts in the Hall of Fame. Gary Roberts would be the guy. Let's settle down. And, the 2 Selkies is nice. Jere Lehtinen has 3. I think if Rod Brind'Amour gets into the Hall of Fame, to me, it's not like a Guy Carmino moment where you just look at it and you go, that guy does not belong. I'll be okay with it, but I just don't think I think
you make a good argument, and honestly, I like concede to you on these. I think you have a better handle on this than I do.
I would just say, Carolina fans, I know you love the guy, and the other thing we should say, if people don't know, his coaching, in theory, has nothing to do with his case as a player. Your coaches are in the builder category, and they're separate, and you're not supposed to combine them. Maybe it doesn't work out. And look, he's a guy that everyone in the hockey world loves.
Right.
You go into that committee. I mean, we know, right? It's the old boys club. There's a very good chance that at some point he'll have enough support to get in. I will just tell you, as somebody who was a diehard hockey fan for all 20 years of his career, there was never a moment where you were watching any of his teams play and tapping the guy next to you going, look at that guy. That guy's a Hall of Famer. That's second line center.
Did he play in that 96 World Cup? Like, was he ever with Canada in a best on best? That's always
he may have been.
He may have been, but that's always a standard to me. But I think maybe you made an argument for, let's say Brind'Amour wins the Stanley Cup in Carolina as a head coach, and he stays there another 10, 12 years. I think you make a good argument. Maybe you put him in the builder category. As weird as that sounds,
he built that franchise as a player and as a coach. If he does that,
I would absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what?
I think
build a 30-foot high statue to him outside the arena. I'm fine with that.
That would be the most chiseled statue in the history
not
of
chiseled
statues.
enough. Wait a second. This is. We made it out of marble, and yet somehow
he looks flabby. He looks flabby. All right, listen, we got to wrap up the pod, and we're going to do this. Actually, we're going to invite you in to This Week in Hockey History, Jesse.
Oh,
okay. So before I give the date, take me back. So for me, the most hurtful trade that ever happened to me as a fan, I was like, just my heart ripped out. Patrick Waugh got traded from Montreal when huge fan of the Habs as a kid, gets traded, heart ripped out. For you as a kid, what was the trade that ripped your heart out?
So this is going to be, I had a very weird fandom as a kid. So I grew up in Colorado during the glory years of the Avalanche. So I was a huge Avalanche fan. Absolutely despised the Detroit Red Wings. Hated them. I could not hate a team more than I hated the Red Wings when I was a kid. But my favorite player didn't play for the Avalanche. My favorite player was Dominik Hasek. And the reason was I played goalie as a kid, and I when I first started playing goalie, my parents couldn't afford gear. So I would go to the thrift store and I'd find gear. So I was wearing a player cage, not a goalie mask. And then I'm watching on TV and I don't even know who Dominik Hasek is. And I'm like, this guy's wearing the same shitty mask as me from Goodwill.
Yeah.
I love this guy. He's my new favorite goalie. I didn't even know he was good at all playing for the Sabres, and heartbreaking when they lost to the Stars in the Stanley Cup final.
Yep.
So I was a huge Dominik Hasek guy, but I'm an Avs fan who hates the Red Wings. When he went to Detroit, it absolutely destroyed me. I couldn't do it. And then he wins a cup, but I couldn't even be happy about it. Like, I wanted Hasek to win a cup so bad, and then I couldn't even enjoy him winning his cup because
I love the idea of like a young goaltender loving Dominik Hasek, because they always say, like, when you've got kids, like, whatever you tell them is forbidden. Right. They will seek out. And you can just picture like goalie coaches being like, all right, kids, do you know Dominik Hasek? Don't do any of that.
Don't do what that guy does.
Please don't be like him. And
right.
young Jesse Granger going home and like sneaking onto like YouTube and like downloading little highlight videos of Dominik Hasek.
Yeah. So that was the one that ripped your heart out, Patrick Waugh. And the reason why I do this, we take you back to June 28th, 1994.
Yep.
It's the NHL Draft.
Hartford.
In Hartford. The Whalers they take Chris Pronger, and it's a big that wasn't the year they took Jeff O'Neill when they had the draft at home. Anyway, long story short, young Sean's favorite player, Wendell Clark, is traded to Quebec. I want you to take the listeners back to how you react. Like, how'd you find out about that?
It's funny. I don't actually remember.
You've blocked it out, the trauma.
Finding out. But, I mean, back then, no Twitter, no nothing. Like, I mean, I probably found out by somebody telling me, coming home and being told, like, hey, this trade.
You must have thought it was a prank, right?
I do remember that there were there was a report on the radio. This is back when we had the All Sports station Toronto was relatively new. And I don't remember, maybe it was Howard Berger or somebody like that had said, I talked to Cliff Fletcher, and he said that something is. He basically had told them, keep your eyes open. You're going to want to be ready because we're going to do something really big. And it was a devastating trade for Leaf fans. I mean, it is hard. I mean, we just finished talking about how much Carolina fans love Rod Brind'Amour. Look, Wendell Clark doesn't belong in the Hockey Hall of Fame, but if there's a Toronto Maple Leaf Hall of Fame for fans of my age, it's Wendell Clark, first ballot all the time. This was the most entertaining, most beloved player that we've ever had. And to see that trade, especially back then, right? I mean, they get Matt Sundin. In hindsight, this was an absolute steal of a trade for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But they've been terrible for years. Wendell has just led them to the conference final 2 years in a row. And now you're trading him for some 20-something Swede who's got a high, he's fancy and he scores. Like Don Cherry almost had an aneurysm when this trade went down.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't remember, where I was when I found out, but the two things that I remember about that, first of all, is in August, you want to talk about how beloved the player is. They had a rally at City Hall to say goodbye to Wendell Clark. And I went with my friend, and Alan Frew played the music. Like, I mean, there's thousands of us there. They brought him up on stage. Ty Domi was there. He wasn't on the Leafs at the time, but it was just this outpouring of a goodbye for a guy who turned out was going to be back a year later. But we didn't know that at the time. The other thing I will say, and the reason that I remembered it was Hartford. Go back. Somebody, I hope it's still there, uploaded the moment on YouTube where this trade is announced on the floor. This gets out, and again, there's no insiders to spoil it, so nobody knows what's happening. And they get up there and they announce the trade, and like each piece, it was 3 players on each side. There's a draft pick on each side, and I think Wendell Clark's the last name that they announced, and you can just hear the crowd oohing and awing after each name, and then they say Matt Sundin, and obviously Hartford fans, they know the Nordiques, they go ooh, and then when they announced Wendell Clark, the reaction in Hartford of just like, holy, they just traded, the Toronto Maple Leafs just traded Wendell Clark. Even in Hartford, they knew that this was a really big moment. And boy, that ripped my heart out, man. Yeah.
No, I think everybody as a fan, you have the one trade that really kind of just gets at you. And yeah, I knew that I wasn't trying to end on a bad note. I just, that was the way it worked out.
We got to ride scooters to the arena to get the vibes back up.
Yeah, that's right. We got to head back now for.
I'm just gonna go sit in the dark in my room for a while, stare into the middle distance.
Listen, next year will be the 30-year anniversary of that trade. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
30
absolutely
years
crazy.
next June. All right. That puts a wrap on this Thursday edition of the pod. Listen, hopefully we don't have any travel stories to write about on our way home here. That it's, I guess for you, what was it? Nashville to Vegas is what? 2-hour flight?
It's like two, almost 3.
And
2
you
hours,
obviously
45
go
minutes.
direct.
Yeah.
There's
Direct
no
everywhere in Vegas. I'm lucky.
Sean, or they routing you through Seattle to get home?
I'm going through, I don't know, Melbourne. Have you guys seen it? Seems kind of strange, but
yeah,
right, we'll give it a shot.
Anytime you book in a flight and you see the +1 day disclaimer, that's bad news.
Yeah. I'm on a submarine at some point, but I think it's gonna be okay.
Oh my God, we're gonna end it there. All right, we want to thank everybody for listening to the Thursday pod here live, or not live, but from Nashville. And speaking of pods from Nashville, Friday, Corey Prodman, Max Boltman will have a complete recap of the second day of the draft. So make sure you download that. Any questions, as always, email us, theathletichockeyshow@gmail.com. Leave us a voicemail, 845-445-8459. Right now, we get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic for $1 a month for 12 months when you visit theathletic.com/hockeyshow.